Good afternoon, everybody. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to our LATAM Smart Energy virtual panel on renewable energy in Brazil. I'm Victor Munoz, a professional investor in renewable energy, real estate, and technology. With me today, I have the pleasure of having five great colleagues in the sector of renewable energy. Allow me to start introducing them. We have Camila Ramos, who is the managing partner of Cela, Clean Energy Latin America. Cela is an investment boutique focused specifically in the sectors of renewable wind, solar, biomass, small hydro. We have with us Marcio Tranim, who is the first vice president of the board of AB Solar, the Brazilian Solar Energy Association. We have the pleasure as well to have with us Luis Fernando Pita from Atlas. As most of you might know, Atlas is a solar photovoltaic generator with projects in Latin America, Uruguay, Chile, Mexico, and of course, Brazil. We have with us as well Nelson Falcao from Nextracker. Nextracker is the supplier of tracking solutions with projects all over the world. And we also have Alejandro Moreno from Canadian Solar, supplier of photovoltaic panels, as well with projects all over the world. So everybody, welcome. It's really a pleasure to have all of you here. And let's dive directly into our conversation, to our questions. Um, we have to start with the obvious question of the impacts of the COVID crisis in Brazil and specifically in our sector of electricity and renewable energy. This has, on the one hand, had specific effects in the demand. So let's talk a little bit about the market, the demand. How do you guys see this electricity demand in the country in the short term, medium term, and long term? With the effects of the crisis will be seen only in the short term, maybe in the medium. How about the long term? How does that relate to prices? How does that relate to the free market? How does that relate to the returns of the projects? As an investor, I'm always thinking in returns. So let's talk a little bit about that. And perhaps Camila, you manage a lot of the statistics and follow the market very, very in very detail. Could you start with some of your views, please?
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to participate in the discussion. Thank you also for all the other panel members here. It will be very interesting to have this discussion with you. So yes, I think in terms of energy demand, the first thing that you asked, I think we're already seeing things recover and pick up. So I was looking today at energy demand figures from CCEE. And I was looking that in April, we had a demand for power go down 12% compared to April last year. And May down 11%. But then in June, we already had, we saw a reduction of 3.7%, so much less. And this month of July, down 2%. So the effects of the pandemic seem to be going away in terms of energy demand. And one thing that I noted that was very interesting is that in July, the amount of demand for power in the free market actually went up compared to the same period last year. So I guess this has been the free market has been the driver of growth in the sector. And talking about free market, I mean, we're seeing important announcements of new contracts in the media, contracts signed after the start of the pandemic. So we have here Atlas to talk about the Canadian Solar and other important other investors that have signed important contracts in the free market after the pandemic. Other signs of the growth of the importance of the free market despite the pandemic. B3 has announced this April this year the launch of this new platform where they will monitor and pre-register free market contracts. And then this platform will give a more transparency for the free market in Brazil because it's growing and becoming more and more important. So this platform will also provide a forward curve for prices based on contracts that are being registered in this platform. So this is great news for the sector and the sign of an increasing maturity and growth of the free market in the country. In terms of distributed generation, it's a very interesting story, because for distributed generation, we have been seeing growth more than double every year in Brazil now. Since the implementation of the net metering regulation in Brazil, we've been seeing a strong growth in the country, solar being so competitive, regulated power tariffs increasing. So if you look at numbers from January to July 2019, right? January to July 2019, we saw 723 new megawatts of new installed capacity for DG in Brazil. And if you look at the same period, so January, July 2020, we saw 1.1 gigawatts. So we already saw growth even in the period of the pandemic. So now that we're picking up from the pandemic, I guess growth will be even stronger. So I think this is all sign that I think the pandemic had a very important impact on power demand that was immediate, basically immediate, but it clearly is showing that it's picking up again as a result mostly of the free market, and distributed generation being an important driver as well.
Excellent. Very, very interesting information. Luis, I'd like to hear from you because, of course, Atlas is a power generator directly affected by changes in the market, prices, demand. How are you seeing this situation vis-a-vis prices, signals to build new projects, vis-a-vis contracting, growth, etc.?
Thank you, Victor. Thanks to everybody that is listening to us. Hello, my colleagues. I think that this is going to be very dependent on how the resumption scenario will work. So we have elaborated 3 load scenarios for 2020. A scenario in L in which we consider that there will be a growth of around 3%, and a scenario in U in which this load will be a recovery in 5.5%, and a scenario in V in which we estimate that there will be a growth of 9%. So obviously these 3 scenarios bump up theory that the stabilization of the economy would not mean an increase in electricity. If we consider that there is a 10% of level of reserve, which is the difference between physical warranty and the consumption of 10%, all these scenarios will mean that more electricity will be needed in Brazil for the incoming years. Also, we need to consider, and I think our colleagues are going to talk about this later, the regulatory changes that are expected based on the PLS 232, which means we'll work on the discount on the Tuesday, price formation, market opening, regulation of the supply, and the separation between Lastro and energy. All this will mean a different scenario in which we are today. So where we think that the main opportunities will come from? Obviously, they will come from, in a short term, from the self-production contracts. So the heavy consumers want to take advantage of the current situation and sign and structure shareholder agreements and PPAs in this modality of self-production. We also believe that there will be enormous amount of bilateral contracts between the heavy consumers of energy and the generators, mainly in the sub-markets in which this consumption is produced. So we believe that the Southeast is going to be a very hot area in the next years. And finally, we also believe that GD will continue the growth that has experienced until now, even though there is a huge discussion regarding the subsidies. We believe that the foundations of this market is already in place and will continue growing. A word on the laylaws. Obviously, laylaws will continue and will have a huge influence on pricing. So we believe that if they continue as of today, in which with a 30% you can grant the interconnection point, will mean that will open and will contribute to the signing of new PPAs in the free market with the 70% energy that can be sold. But if this regulation changes, it will mean that laylaws will, in my opinion, have a higher price in the future, because it will need to be in brackets subsidized by the fact that the 70% remaining capacity will be sold in the market. So in general, we believe that there is a very promissory future in the Brazilian market.
Great. Now, we've heard the views of the person who analyzes the market, a power generator. I also like to hear the views of one of our main suppliers. Nelson, what are your views about this? Do you concur, a difference of opinion here? How are you seeing the situation?
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, my dear colleagues. We are just saying we are at home because we have been meeting in many other instances. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the organizers. Listen, I don't think there is too much more to say after Camila's and Luis' words. It's been clear to us that first the COVID crisis is almost gone in the sense of energy reduction. We see pretty much very fast recover on the energy consumption. And we also see a big movement towards taking advantage of the low prices on the merchant, on what's called the free market. The numbers that we have here from the CCE, the Chamber of Commercialization, shows some of the economic sectors like food and beverage and commerce already growing quite a lot in regards to what was their consumptions last year. So it shows a clear path to be less dependent on the leilões, the auctions from the government for the captive market. But it looks like the merchant market is really taking a very important part on the demand of energy, and as a consequence on the demand of the materials. We have seen many large solar projects that are at this moment being structurized. They are rather big in unit, but many of them. So we are not seeing a consequent decrease or deep decrease in what's likely to be the demand in the next year or the next couple of years. So that's what we are seeing for now.
Great. Thank you very much.
Victor, just to complement and to show the strength and this, I guess, drive of the free market. Like we're a consultancy firm and we work a lot on the generation side, right? The investor side. So we're usually like modeling for the generators. And most recently, we've been being approached by the consumers, like the energy consumers, trying to look for opportunity, trying to look for these contracts, like them proactively looking for these types of contracts. So I guess this is a big change in the market.
Agreed. As you guys mentioned, regulation is extremely important in our markets. Right now, we have a very hot and interesting topic, which is ANEEL's Resolution 482. It has, of course, a big topic of the cost of the use of the transmission and distribution system. But I think in addition to that, will be good to also cover regulation and dynamics related to connection points for the different projects. Marcio, I'd like to hear your views on this point initially.
Okay, thank you very much, Victor. Good afternoon, everybody, my colleagues. Victor, I think that this topic is a very large topic, okay? And I think we have these changes in the regulation, in the regulatory framework, in both sides of solar activity. One is the distributed generation, the revision of 482. That is really a hot topic. And we have another hot topic that is the changes in the regulatory framework of the centralized generation due to the PLS 232 in the Senate, and another project of law 1917 in the chambers of deputies. Both of them, the change in the regulation of the distributed generation and the other one in the centralized generation, they are absolutely important for the future, the near future and the long future of the solar generation in Brazil. When we assume this with the pandemic, we see a very challenging situation for solar, but with a bunch of opportunities for investors, for consumers, for everybody. I'll start to say something about the centralized generation, and then Camila can add something about the distributed generation. But regarding the centralized generation, I think we have the both project of laws, one in Senate, another one in the Chamber of Deputies. Both presents interesting opportunities for investors in solar energy, especially in the centralized generation. The first one is the market liberalization that we understand as a solar as a solar technology that has an excellent fit with the technology. Why this? The market liberalization that started there in 1998 with Fernando Henrique Cardoso, but unfortunately it stopped after this. Now, according to these PLs, probably will have a fully liberalized market in 2026. I hope it happens, because for a very flexible and this technology like solar, it's good for the customers to move to this alternative of the normal distribution companies alternative that they have, the normal regulated tariffs. So I think that the liberalization of the market is a very important movement that we have that will help a lot the solar growth here in Brazil. There are other one, for example, today the solar technology and all the renewables has a discount, the wheeling charges of 50% to be renewables. This will end, it will stop. I think this comes also thinking in solar or wind or any renewables, it could appear as a bad moment to happen, but I don't think it's a bad moment. I think that we are competitive enough to show to the market that we need to, that this kind of incentive can be reduced. Yes, reduced with some schedule. It's not reduced from one day to another day, but with this we can show that solar, even without this incentive, can be competitive. And this brings another important point of this regulation, this new regulation, proposed regulation, that is the attributes of each technology. We think that to have a good competitiveness among all the technologies in Brazil, and I think all technologies, they are important for the energy matrix, but I think that the correct calculation of the energy, or not only energy attributes, but of the attributes of each technology will help a lot the expansion of the system. For example, solar, we have an wonderful environmental attributes. We have social attributes regarding the creation of employments. The solar technologies, this is the technology among all the others that creates more employment. We have, for example, hourly prices. That is another point of this change in the regulation, that for solar technology, it fits very well with the peak of the demand in Brazil, especially in the big cities. So solar technology can fit with this, and this is another argument that we need to use as an attribute for solar technology. So in the end of the day, a good calculation and a rational expansion of the system must pass by this right calculation of each attribute of each technology, and solar can contribute a lot with this. Also wind, also thermal, gas, all of them must contribute. But solar is competitive enough to be or to keep competitive, as we see in 2019, was the most competitive source in Brazil. And the last point about connection, what I think is very important, as mentioned by our colleagues in the first question, I think that the movement that the market is facing from a regulated market to a free market is bringing some concerns for the investors regarding connection. The connection in Brazil, as in other countries, is one of the bottlenecks for new expansions in Brazil. Solar has some advantages on it because solar is more democratic, so we have more spots in Brazil where solar is good. For other renewables, it's more complicated than in solar. But again, this is something that is a concern, and somehow we need to try to establish a clear rule regarding the connection to the grid that is a main bottleneck. And this is one of the main concerns because we have a limited number points of connection for, I don't know, more than 50 gigawatts, for example, of projects already developed in Brazil. So this is something that we need to address and one point of concern. Now, I think that Camila can talk a little bit more about distributed generation. Camila, and anything I can add something. Thank you.
Okay. So now talking about distributed generation. So we've had the net metering system in place here in Brazil, the regulatory framework in place in Brazil since 2012. And this regulatory framework, which was then updated and improved in 2015, has been definitely the driver of growth for distributed generation in Brazil. So it allows for distributed generation energy credits to be exchanged to the grid with the grid from energy from the grid, and it's basically a 1 kilowatt to 1 kilowatt ratio as it is today. When the regulatory framework was updated so the regulatory framework for distributed generation is 482, the Resolução Normativa 482. It was updated by Resolução Normativa 687. It started allowing for virtual net metering and community solar business models, so remote distributed generation projects also allowed to develop in the country. And this has allowed for people or companies that would like to lease solar system and not necessarily buy them to benefit from solar energy or distributed generation energy as well. So this has allowed for even an even stronger growth and democratization of distributed generation in the country. So very, very positive. We've seen the creation of a national market for demand, but also of an ecosystem of companies. So there's over 12,000, as the estimates, around 12,000 distributed generation installers in the country of all shapes and sizes, which has created a lot of jobs in the country. And with distributed generation being very competitive with increasing power tariffs and decreasing costs of the solar technology. But since the regulatory framework was created, it already mentioned in the text of the regulation that it would be revised by December 31st, 2019. We already passed that date due to delays in the process, and also now due to the pandemic. The regulatory changes that should occur, they should occur by probably the first semester or trimester of next year. There have been consultations promoted by ANEEL, the regulatory body, with the involvement of the population, of society in general. But this means that the components of the energy tariff that will be able to be exchanged with the grid will be decreased. So we don't know yet by how much, because ANEEL itself has proposed different alternatives. There's 5 different alternatives of possibilities, and even more, because there are legislation in place also to change the actual legislation for distributed generation. So what we know is that it will change. We don't know how it will change. it will probably be less beneficial than today, especially to remote projects. But still, we believe that distributed generation will continue to be extremely competitive. What is happening is that companies that are already in the market today, there has been a rush to build projects to be able to benefit and grandfather the regulatory framework that is in place. We, like I said, changes were expected to take place by the end of last year, but probably will be implemented by the beginning of next year. So I guess it's pretty clear they will, but the technology and those business models will continue to be quite competitive.
Great. You guys mentioned a very important point, which is how competitive solar electricity, solar energy is. And I want to focus on one of the key factors here, of course, which is the cost of the panels. Alejandro, for years and years, we've seen a more productive and efficient production of panels. Prices of panels continue to go down. Actually, a lot of developers count on the prices of panels to continue to go down, even to make their bids and getting their calculation, future prices, etc. How far can this go? How low can these prices go? How do you see that evolving the next couple of years? And in the case of Brazil, as we know, the real is probably perhaps one of the most volatile currencies in the world. How do you, as a supplier, see that? And then later on, of course, I'd like to hear the views of our friends from Atlas Energy, who are the guys buying the panels at the other end. But let's start with
Yeah, no, thank you, Victor, and thank you everyone for inviting me to this virtual panel that is really interested about one of the major markets, for us, for Canadian solar. I will give you the short answer. The short answer is that, I have been for many years thinking that most probably next year it's impossible to reduce even more the price of the modules. And every year I'm wrong. So the answer is that most probably we will continue to see some declining in prices. No, I would like to give some context on this. No, what is extremely important. On one side, we should not just focus on the price of the modules or the price of the whole capex. No, we need to focus also on the efficiency. No, because it's the main driver. No, to the decrease in the capex in the projects that we have seen in the last year. No, just to give you some reference, the first project that we developed in Brazil, that was awarded in the first auction. It seems a long time ago, but it was only 5 years ago or 6 years ago. At that time, we were considering modules with around 290, 280 watt peak. No, now everybody, not only Canadian Solar, but all our competitors also, everybody is considering for next year modules very close to 600 watts. No, so we are talking about doubling the efficiency, and this is logically improving, the whole system. No. Apart from that, logically, the price of the modules is decreasing a lot because of the volume. No, the volume not only in the Brazilian market, but the volume globally. No, now because of the COVID, we are also facing a very good situation in our market. No, we have the privilege to be working in a market that has an amazing future. No, we are all every day listening, the news from Europe, the European Union, talking about the new Green Deal. We can see that now in the elections in US, one of the most hot topics is related also to the renewable energies. Where Joe Biden, the Democrat party, is really trying to promote, an amazing volume of investment in renewable energies, and all of these will be increasing the volume from all the manufacturers, not only solar modules, also inverters, trackers, all the equipment that we need. And that will really help to continue decreasing even more, the capex. No, regarding also the price of the general system, the capex, not only the modules. Very recently, we have been obtaining many manufacturers, different exemptions, regarding the Starifario taxes in Brazil, and that is logically helping. No, traditionally Brazil has been a country with a let's say challenge tax system, but the reality is that in all the renewable energy projects, we can see that that the complication is not as big as we were expecting at the beginning, and there are many assumptions that we can really benefit. And this also has helped to be competitive and to really continue growing the market. As Camila mentioned before, also something very important is the whole ecosystem that we have in the country. I mean, if we have many local subcontractors, many local companies, that will also continue helping pushing down the prices. And finally, another question you make regarding how we are managing the currency risk. I mean, look, the first comment is that at the end, currency risk is something that we are all evaluating in the returns of our projects, and that is why the returns in the projects in Brazil are higher than the returns of the projects in Japan or in UK. So we are all assuming that this risk could happen, and that is why we have some kind of a buffer, in order to be a little bit protected. Then also in Brazil, traditionally, we have been using some kind of natural hedge that is coming from inflation. I mean, most of our PPAs are linked to inflation, and although there is not the inflation is not really increasing automatically at the same time, that we have this kind of devaluation of the currency. In most of the cases, has been covering partially, or if not totally, the gap, that we have. We also faced in the past, some situations like this. Again, 5 years ago, when we were awarding the first tender, the real was around 2.3 versus dollar, and just 1 year later it was around 4.2. So I mean, this devaluation during the COVID is for sure not the worst one that we could be expecting in the market, and it's true also that in the last let's say 8 to 10 weeks is more stabilized. But we don't see any other way to make any protection, because any other mechanisms like hedge are extremely expensive. So are making any transaction will not make any sense. So I mean, at some point the sponsors are really assuming the risk because of the natural hedge that we have.
Luis, you are at the other side. You're here. You have to buy any spending capex. You have to manage all these risks. What are your views on this, and how competitive can solar really be in the future?
We believe that it's a combination of several factors. Panels in the capex, when I started in the industry, which was when the industry started in Brazil in 2013, were something like 60% of the capex. Today is much less than that. So I believe that we'll continue seeing a reduction on the capex effect on the leverage cost of electricity. We will see that the impact of the financing is extremely important and is increasing. And also, we are facing in Atlas movement towards more and more sophisticated environmental programs, and associated with a lot of attention on the communities. And we also see that our proposal is very well received, not only by the market, by the final customers, which requires this sophisticated socio-environmental program, but also by the banks. So combination of these three facts, I think, is going to be the trend of the future. Obviously, capex is the most important part of this equation. But as Alejandro says, the efficiency of the panels, the new technologies, also the fact that we can supply energy without intermittencies to our final customers through swaps, through combined sources of energy, lead to a more and more reduced cost of energy. Tax, subsidies, etc., obviously are important components, but we believe that subsidies do not help to, at this particular stage, for a sane market. Okay, so we believe that there is a very bright future in renewables in Brazil, particularly in solar, in this new scenario post regulations.
Excellent. Marcy, would you like to add something here?
I would like to add. Can I?
Yeah.
Okay. But what I like to add is we all have seen during the beginning of the pandemic how complicated is the dependency of anyone or any country or any business from sourcing from one country or just a couple of countries. What I would like to add to this discussion is that first, Brazil has a very strong local industry for many of the components for the solar industry. We have today 12 manufacturers of inverters, 11 manufacturers of tracker, and 8 manufacturers of solar panels in Brazil, producing in Brazil, and with the advantages that they help offset this problem of the fluctuation of the currency. And also, the other point I'd like to raise here is that the logistics for a large solar plant is a very important cost of the total investment. Now, by the time you bring materials from a country far away from Brazil, you have all the time you have to bring this material into the country. You have all the taxes. Some of them are changing today, but you always have a significant amount of fiscal engineering that you need to do, and by the time you put all together, all the way up in the northern state, you end up with a heavy component of logistics. So Brazil is not at all closed borders for imported materials, but at the same time, when you compare the price of a product made abroad, put in the solar site all the way up in the middle of nowhere, and you compare with some of the local products, maybe not all, maybe not always, but in many cases is equal or similar prices for different components. So the best option many times is to mix and match depending on the design of the plant, on the location of the plant, what are you buying abroad, what are you buying in Brazil, and also you have the finance alternative of BNDES that is becoming more and more attractive over the time. They just remodel their conditions, the finance frame. So with all said, I mean, when you do a large plant in Brazil, it's very important to consider all those alternatives and balance in the financial model. And the other point I'd like to contribute is, to Alejandro's point of efficiency. Obviously, the model is very visible. You are seeing models that are more and more efficient for every generation, but also other products like the tracker themselves, they are more efficient as well when they contribute to more power being generated using bifacial models. When you have a bifacial models getting light from below, you're getting more and more depending on the tracker design. And also you have advanced systems with data collection of the angulation of the panels that you can optimize during backtracking times. You can optimize during a day that is shady. So there are several other technologies that will help the plant to produce more with the same capex. So all in all, when you do a large project, all these components may make a big difference in the financial model at the end of the day.
Yes, correct. Let's move now to an interesting topic, a change that is coming upon us, and I believe it's going to have very different impacts on different technologies and, of course, on the market overall. Here in Brazil, we're moving to an hourly tariff for the generation of electricity. How is this going to affect different sources of electricity? We all know the largest peak of consumption of electricity in general in a country, in a city, is towards the end of the day. Of course, solar generates most of it between 9 and 4 p.m. How's that going to affect solar? Is it benefiting other sources? Are we already there to combine solar with some sort of storage system, battery, so that we can generate at certain moments and then release that electricity at peak hours? And finally, I'd like to include here something that we still really don't have in Brazil, but could be a trend, are hybrid parks somehow the answer to this as well. Let's start with Camila. Alejandro, let's hear from you on this topic.
Hi. Yeah, so I think starting with your last question, I mean, we haven't seen a lot of any like significant hybrid projects in Brazil. I guess it has to do with the projects being built here, like the solar projects are not necessarily like the best location where the locations of the wind projects are in Brazil, and because of the growing importance of the submarket in the southeast, because of the free markets, then solar projects are very competitive in the southeast of the country, and the wind projects are in the northeast of the country. So I haven't seen this as a trend. Like, I guess we were trying as a country, right, to organize maybe an auction or an R&D project, but not on a large scale. Like, I'm not seeing, I don't know if you guys are seeing anything different, but I'm not seeing, like, in the short term at least, a movement towards that. But I think it also has a lot to do with the way our power matrix is in Brazil, right? We have a very diversified power matrix where we have a lot of hydro, which we use, that could be used or could be seen as a battery. We have a complementarity of the energy sources, like wind generates better in some regions at night, and then solar generates more during the day. So I guess I see like the grid here in Brazil working more as this type of balancing of the and diversification of the energy matrix than necessarily doing it on a project by project basis. What I'm hearing from consumers is that they are looking at their portfolio of the energy that they buy, and they're diversifying. So energy consumers that already have a lot of contracts, for example, with wind projects, they are now looking to secure contracts with solar projects so they can flatten their curve. So they're doing that themselves instead of the generation happening on the generation side.
Mm-hmm. Alejandro,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would like to talk a little bit about the solar plus storage, because this is a game changer in our market. I mean, this is already a reality in many of the markets that we are working. I mean, just to give you an example, for example, in US, we have around 2 gigawatts pipeline of projects, and absolutely all of them are including some portion of the storage. In Australia, it's the same situation. We are right now with a portfolio around 500, 600 megawatts, and all of them also including storage. And it's not our case only. I mean, again, all our competitors in California, for example, you cannot really sign any PPA if you are not including a good portion of the storage. So I just think that in Brazil we are not still there, in terms of regulation. I mean, we really need to see some changes in the regulation in order to be sure that we can also receive some additional benefits in terms of capacity payments mainly. But even without the capacity payments, depending on the final prices, hourly prices, I really believe that is going to be the next big movement. And again, the capex, the prices that we have been achieving these days everywhere, including Brazil, are competitive enough to be sure that we can really be a big reference in the energy market as soon as we can really deploy batteries in all our systems.
Mm-hmm. Marcio, would you like to add something on these points?
Yes, just a very short point regarding what is being talked about hybrid systems. We need to think the following: the hourly price will give some additional incentive, like an attribute for the solar technology. But what's important also to mention is that it's also good for wind. Why? As Camila mentioned, wind and solar in Brazil has a good complementarity. So the more solar, probably the more wind, it will come together. And we have in Brazil another interesting point, that is the hydro. So the hydro is the big battery of the system. We have a completely interconnected system. Why not to consider this in the operation of the system? So we have space for all the sources, and solar has a very important role in it. And the last point, the hybrid We are only thinking here regarding complementarity with other technology and so on, but we have a very important point regarding the hybrid projects, that is the connection restrictions that we have. If we are able to optimize the connection of our projects, it's very interesting for the system. Nowadays, we are obliged to dimension, for example, for our solar projects, we are dimensioning a T-line substation and so on for the megawatts that a solar plant can generate in the peak hour, in the middle of the afternoon, and then during the night, this connection system is not used. So this is this optimization of money, of the connection system, of the capacity of this. So hybrid will come together to try to optimize this, and this is a very important point due to the connection restrictions we have in Brazil.
We have 11 minutes more for a panel, and there's 2 questions that I really want to cover. So let's go into a very completely different topic, which is financing of projects, specifically in our solar sector. We all know that BNDES has been there, BNB in the last few years. Infrastructure debentures have as well taken a very important place in the financing of our projects. So 3 sub-points here. 1, are there any new alternatives that we can use to finance and build these projects? Second, let's talk a little bit about the fact that we're moving as well into the free market, as we discussed, and therefore now the risk of the credit of the PPA is not the government and the system, is more one-on-one. How are we managing, how we see this bankability of the off-taker of those new contracts? And number 3, specific structure that's come out in the market, we call it the FIPI-E. Can it really play a role here in terms of financing of projects? So here, I just want to open it. Whoever wants to take the first one, please raise your hand and go ahead. Luis?
No, I mean, I think I would like to complement a little on what you're saying, which is the fact that some of the banks like IDB has a tranche to invest in reais. So it's also a new and different source of financing for the country that hasn't had a lot of presence until now. Okay. I would say obviously the BNB has played a enormous role in the development of the solar technology in Brazil, and I don't know if there is many projects that have not been self-financed. It hasn't been through BNB. So I just wanted to point it as the fact of the IDB entering into Brazil.
Okay, Alejandro, I saw that you also wanted to comment something.
Yeah, no, I mean, regarding the FIP, this vehicle that now is a trend in the market, similar to what the Yieldcos, 5 years ago. So I really think that the FIP is really a very good vehicle for renewable energy projects. So I mean, it's a reality that now there are some FIPs in the market, many others ongoing, many other companies really assessing, if they're really interested to create this kind of vehicle or to receive the benefits of this vehicle. But I really believe that if it's not FIP, it will be similar vehicle. But at the end, this is really helping, again, with the scale and the volume that the market in Brazil is addressing as of today. I mean, now that we are talking about many companies, like Allas, like Canadian Solar, like Sunco, like many others that are really trying to develop and execute big portfolios of projects in the country, the FIP can really help, to decrease the cost of the capital at the end of the day. And can also help to bring during the execution phase, especially during the bridge finance side, also source of finance from international banks. Because otherwise, we are all the time relying, especially in local banks, in Brazilian banks, Santander, Itaú, BTG Pactual, companies that are already very active in the country. But dropping these projects in operation in the FIP will really help also to bring other international banks during the execution phase.
Excellent. Camila, I think you also want to add some points here.
Yeah, just to complement, I mean, as you mentioned, right, we had in the beginning of the renewable energy sector or infrastructure in general, we're very used to being financed by the BNDES, and then as the BNDES changed its targets and goals and to become a less subsidized source of finance, we saw the rise of the BNB, another development bank financing projects, and it continues to be, I guess, the most competitive source in terms of cost. I was talking to BNB today. They told me they financed over 50 projects already of wind and solar that are just in the free market, which is a new thing going on in Brazil, because we used to have all these projects in the auctions. But as you already mentioned, the rise of the infrastructure bond, the project bonds, and one of the main factors that has, or the main factor that has increased their competitiveness, of course, is the decrease in the inflation and the future interest curve here in the country. So these debentures, they have been issued at very competitive rates and with increasingly longer terms as well. So they have become very much more competitive. And as a reference, there are cases that we've seen of large corporates, for example, issuing corporate debentures even to prepaid BNDES, which used to be the most competitive source around. So, and for solar, I was just looking at some of the issuances between October 2018 and January this year. It was 2.3 billion reais of project bonds issued just for the solar sector, utility scale and DG. And related to that, I mean, last month we had the announcement by the government of the publication of the decree, law 10,387, which is the green bonds decree to simplify and speed up the process for issuance of green bonds for infrastructure projects in Brazil that provide environmental benefits. So this includes for sure guaranteed solar projects. So green finance itself is a theme that is, as you know, increasingly being brought up and valued by global investors, and this trend will continue to become even much more important here in the country as well.
Thank you. To finalize, I think we all have the blessing of working in the renewable energy sector. Clean energy, the ability to provide electricity, hopefully at better prices, that makes economies more competitive. And I think we all want to see this sector continue growing, continue being very successful. It impacts everybody. As investors, we want to have the opportunity to deploy capital and obtain good returns. For the people in general, you can be offering jobs, providing knowledge. For the consumers, hopefully a more reliable, better prices, electricity. And of course, for the government, the development of the sector means as well a stream of revenue, a stream of taxes that we all pay for the participation in this business. I want to go one by one, asking you, what are the main challenges that you see for the future growth and development of this specific sector? And I'd like to start with you, Camila.
Sorry, on mute. Challenges. There are several challenges, right? I mean, it's, I think connection is an issue we're seeing, like for competitive projects, regulatory changes that are coming up, but they have been like dragging on. So I think there's some uncertainty there. But I guess I'm always very positive. I've been in the sector since 2007 working. We've seen like the birth and growth of wind and now of solar. And I guess the story here is not very different from what like the big trend worldwide is, like increasingly competitive technology. So I'm very positive and seeing the technologies, you know, go ahead and become more competitive in the face of several of these adversities. The sector manages always to, and the technology manages always to surprise everyone.
That's right. Thank you, Camila. Let's now go ahead with Nelson. What are your views on the challenges we face?
I think the challenges that we are facing are none of the ones we discussed here. I think we have a good path for demand. We have a good path for recovery from COVID. But my main concern is how Brazil as a country keeps attractiveness to investors. That's much more complex than the solar sector alone by itself. But obviously, we understand that even if Brazil has a fantastic solar capacity and a vibrant industry, a good regulatory frame, at the end of the day, if I want to put several $1 million in a country, the country has to be stable, the country has to be reliable, the country has to be attractive for my money. And that's in the end my concern. Obviously, it's a very complex issue. It comes from different situations, from different points, political, financial, etc. But my message to the listeners is that Brazil has had, as many other countries, ups and downs and difficulties. But what Brazil is doing on solar is right, is stable, is good. The regulatory frame has been worked out. We have associations like UpSolar that are, helping quite a lot to support the government or to give support to the government to make the right policies. We have, suppliers of many different orders. You have good labor. Luis and Alejandro, that have been putting plants together in far places. They have found, a reliable labor force. Camila can testify about the financing system. So we have very good fundamentals. So please keep believing in Brazil in the medium and long term. It's really going to be a very good bet if you put your money here.
Luis, your turn.
I will definitely like to stress the point that Nelson has brought. Also, in comparison with other markets, like important markets like Mexico, in Latin America, there is not many other substantial options. So the ones that are, I wouldn't say foreigners, because I consider me as Brazilian, as Spanish, but people have been here around for a while, knows a lot of these ups and downs, will continue like that. But I think it's a trend that goes like this, so each up is slightly over the bump that was before, and it goes with the natural character of the country. I will repeat some of the other challenges that we have. I think the end of subsidies, as we discussed, is going to be beneficial for the market in the medium term. Will have an impact logically in the very short term. The transition from the regulated market to the free market, especially in regards to the approval of new outorgas, which performance will be a good solution. The guarantee of the connection subject to the deposit of the warranties. The new taxes framework, how it ends, we still do not know. Apparently, it's going to be a kind of a revolution on the Brazilian taxes. So definitely, this will have a different framework. Probably will be more attractive in the future. This CBH tax, we still don't know how it will work. Will lead to the end of the ready. Will rebalance the price offered to customer. I think it will work on a way. And last but not least, I think sustainability is the key word for the future of our industry. It's a top priority for our company. It's a top priority for the customers we are talking to, and they pay a lot of attention on the programs that we develop that we think are state of the art. We're investing a lot of time and dedication to these characteristics of our proposal. And as I said before, also the banks are more and more interested in contributing with sophisticated socio-environmental proposals. So I think it's going to play a very differential role in the future.
Very good. Very good. Alejandro, you want to add something else?
Yeah, very quickly. I mean, 100% in agreement with Nelson and Luis regarding the stable political and regulatory framework. No, this is critical, especially in our case, we're international investors, and so we really love the country. We have been working for many years in the country, but at the end we need to report to headquarters and Spain. Sometimes some turbulence, in the market, and that is tough. So I mean, it's very important to keep the stable framework. And then the second point is that sometimes in this market, and this is not unique in Brazil, this happens in many other markets, we could be creating a problem because of the volume of the market itself. No, I mean, sometimes we would like to run too quickly. We would like to deliver many megawatts, many gigawatts at the same time. And we need to be careful. No, I mean, we need to avoid the speculation. We need to avoid this term that we are talking many times, that is cannibalization, in the market. No, so we really need to be. I mean, we know that there are some constraints in the network, in the grid, in terms of connections. So we just need to be careful on that. And I mean, the growth is always good, but we need to have a stable growth. No?
Excellent. And I want to leave last Marcio, because as representative of Ave Solar, he kind of joins together the views of the different players in the sector. And in that sense, I think it would be a very good way of closing with your views on the challenges that we have.
Okay, it's tough to mention something new after all our colleagues mentioned everything that is important. I think that Brazil has the market fundamentals in the end of the day. Okay, market fundamentals means stability, means a potential consumption market. So 2010 million consumers. So I think that Brazil is a democratic country. So I think that Brazil has the market fundamentals for investors to keep believing to invest their money here. For sure, stability is necessary. Political stability, economic stability, everything is necessary. But I think we are in a good path in this way. I think as the main concern, talking in general about the solar technology, I think that is how to adequate the expansion of Brazil from a completely regulated market, not completely, but basically the expansion was based on regulated market until yesterday, okay, to a new expansion order that will be driven by free market. So this we need to understand how banks will react and are reacting to give finance, how off-takers will react because they are used to buy energy with 3 years PPA, 4 years PPA, 5 years PPA, moving to a longer term PPA. We need to understand how investors will deal with this risk that is not a regulated risk. Is not we are not selling energy more in a reserve auction with the credit risk absolutely mitigate. So the several players, they need to understand how to act in this new reality, and they need to act together. And also the government needs to understand that that they need to have a very good view on the free market and start to forget about the regulated market. The regulated market was important; it will keep important for some years, but I think that they need to switch and start to think in the free market as the real alternative to for expansion. And expansion means security in the operation of the system. This is something that we need to understand. We as investors, we as off-takers, we as Brazilian government, we as financial sector, how to act in this new environment.
Great. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for your participation. Nelson, Alejandro, Luis, Marcio, and of course, Camila. I'd just like to finish saying, as an investor, I tend to look things as objectively as possible. But I've always been optimistic about Brazil, the future and the potential of the country. Sometimes it might feel we take a couple of steps back, but I believe Brazil in the end is moving forward. And as the time goes by, we'll continue maturing different areas that it needs to do. And it needs, as any other country, the effort of everybody, of course, the government. We also need the effort of the media. We also need the effort of the industrials. We also need the effort of the people. Everybody has to contribute a little this, pull their own weight to make the country successful. For those of us who chose Brazil as our home and that love this country, that's one of the goals, and we'll be happy to see it like that. So just wanted to end with this positive note. Again, thank you very much, and I hope to see you all in one of our next panels in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.